Delish, Trish.
Trish. So you're Trish?
Yeah, I guess I am sometimes. Everything must be shortened. All things. Even your lifespan.
I guess. I'm not
Overworked, underpaid.
underappreciated. Yeah. All of the
I'm
above.
okay if... It's like, yeah, I'm okay if you die sooner by working harder. It's great. Benefits me in the short term. I heard a little beep there. What was that sound? I don't know.
I heard no beep.
Well, like a
Beep.
notification or something.
Beep on your
which is
end?
weird because I have like the do not disturb on. I don't know what's up. Oh, it's LinkedIn. Look at you, LinkedIn. Go to hell.
What are they telling you?
Let me find out. Post notification. Post somebody the messaging.
Hey, Evan. It was really nice to meet you on LinkedIn. Would you like to have...
Your podcasting could sound better. Can I help you with your reach on social media? I offer these services.
I get those as well.
Are you hiring?
So I got to say, writing an ASI right now, trying to get it out. And...
What is that? Additional services, something?
No.
What is it?
Such a
I'm
bad architect
removed.
you are.
I've been removed.
Architect's supplemental instructions. It is a mechanism to issue changes during construction administration that could or could not have a financial impact on the project. It's just, we're saying, hey, this needs to be changed. Here is the information that it will supersede the current documents that you have, and then you'll let us know whether or not this is a proposed change order or there's a no cost revision.
So it's a modification to the design of
Yes.
something that hasn't been built yet.
Yes.
And therefore was not bid, so
Right.
it's...
Or in this
late-
particular
late-
case, I was telling you, this was a lab building that we were doing. We did the lab building based off of not having any users because at the time this was kind of it went out onto the streets with no users, COVID, all of that other stuff. Now that we're emerging from all of that, now we're the university, or actually the hospital in this particular case, is bringing the university on in all the different users. Now they're trying to fit out this lab building with their specific needs. And so
it's client-driven change. It's not like something that you found as some omission of the documents that then needed to be updated. It's like, okay, so everybody understands, like, these changes are probably going to cost more money, but it's being initiated by the owner side.
Yeah.
But this is just like the way you document all that. Okay.
It's absolutely 100% owner driven. And it was always expected. It honestly was always, it wasn't something that we went into this saying, we just really we basically labeled it as a generic lab building, knowing that down the road. And so as we're designing this future lab building, we wanted to make sure that we're designing with enough future flexibility that whatever they throw at it, we would be able to accommodate. Now, there was a lot of limitations because this is both an existing building and an addition to an existing building. It is not a blank slate. And so, there are some limitations that we have to put on them. There's like, hey, we want all of this. And we're like, hey, you can do almost all of this. And they're like, well, why can't we do all of this? And there's the back and forth of this. Like, well, this is the way we work. It's just like, well, this is the way the building will allow you to work because this is all we've got out of it.
Other people made those decisions before you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, we expect to be doing this. And our current space is fit out, let's just say like a laser lab, that it's fit out with all sorts of different vibration mitigation systems. And if we didn't design to that, especially as the higher you go up in a building, especially like this mid-rise building that we're doing, there are certain limitations that you can and can't do. You know, there are some ways of mitigating vibration at the piece of equipment, you know, but if the building can't assist in it, then it's all the piece of equipment that has to do it. And then you ask yourself, okay, is this acceptable? You know, like the PI, the principal investigator, they say, okay, you know, if the building's not going to help, you know, this is how much it's going to cost me to spring isolators and, you know, dampers and all this other stuff to this piece of equipment.
Could you do like a raised floor, like a fully dampened raised floor that would just, I'm just thinking of like, have you seen GoPro's technology? Like the way that they can stabilize motion on a camera when I'm riding my mountain bike down the rockiest trail ever. And like the footage is rock solid and it's in this little tiny box that sits on my chest or on my helmet. Yeah. Seems like we could apply that technology to a space in architecture and have full 3-axis isolation from and stabilization from any movement possible.
Okay, and moving on.
Make it happen. Make it happen.
You know,
if GoPro can do it, you can do it.
But see, they're only trying to stabilize images. They're not trying to stabilize things down to the atomic level, the subatomic level.
Oh, well.
And so,
I mean, I guess if you want to introduce that constraint, fine.
Exactly. So, you know, the interesting thing about it is just like there are things that we've done. We've done, you know, fully separated, isolated slabs that have basically like a dampening system within the slab as stage one of multiple stages to get it down to such the micronic, I don't know, we're going to make up a word. You know,
moronic, like, micronic level.
the most minuscule moronic level possible to basically make it where nothing moves, nothing shakes, nothing.
That sounds cheap.
Yeah. And then when you're doing that on a building that's existing, and say, for instance, you're like, well, you know, can't you just do a raised isolated floor? It would be great if we had that kind of flexibility, because yes, that could be a possibility. If we didn't have basically 12-foot floor to floor, you know, heights already, we have constraints, you know, a minimum constraint of, whatchamacallit, the minimum constraints on the actual equipment, you know, like equipment that they're wheeling through on carts and everything else.
Getting it in there. Yeah.
That's a minimum of 8'6". And so nothing can hang lower than 8'6", so they just can't move through their site, you know, through their space. And so you're just like, you add all of these constraints together, and the question really is, okay, what can and can't we actually do in the space, you know, is going to make it functional? And then we go through this whole assessment of everything. And then we basically tell them, yes, you can do your work the way that you normally do your work. No, you can't. Here are some of the constraints. Let them know whether or not, then they tell us if those constraints are acceptable for them to proceed with doing these changes. And if it's not, then they basically say, okay, well, we're out of this, you know.
Sounds like a contract for a new building at that point. Right. It's funny because they're basically saying, and they weren't at the table early enough, right, during when all the decisions were being made, but they're saying like, look, this is what we need to do our job. And you're saying, well, because of this constraint and this constraint and this constraint and the decisions that were made before that, you can't. And they're like, all we need is the tools to do our job. And you're saying, this isn't the space for you.
That is the unfortunate news that sometimes we have to deliver. It's like, well, this isn't the space that is going to accommodate how you do this. And we don't have to break that news to the actual PI. No, we have to break the news to the client to then break it to the PI.
But they will definitely throw you under the bus. You are the bad guy. Always.
Yeah. Like, why can't we do this? This is like, the most current requests are, we would like to have break rooms within, you know, our labs. And we've already, you know, building's already been built. A lot of like plumbing and everything has already been run. Everything's already done.
We could fit a vending machine in there. Come on.
Well, I mean, vending machine. Yeah, I'd say yes. If that is the limit of your break room, then yes, we can do that. But a sink, a dishwasher, all of these other things with all, associated plumbing and everything else, when, oh yeah, by the way, where you want to put it is immediately over an electrical room. Guess what? Guess what you can't do?
I don't see a problem here.
Well, that's the thing. That is, what's funny is that is the thing that a lot of people don't see, is they don't see the problem. Like, why is that a problem? It's just like, well, code is, and then you look at their lab and of course they don't care about code because you look at the way that they're working now and you're like, oh, I'm going to just pretend I don't see this because these are violations and all of this other stuff. But you're just like, wow, it becomes the challenge of education to somebody who's more focused on, literally more focused on the subatomic level than of like this big macro view of like, why can't the building accommodate what I do? It's just a building. It's just 4 walls. It's a roof. It's a floor. Why can't it do that? And you're just like, well, the building is not as dumb as you think it is.
Well, and you as the architect are zooming in and zooming out and zooming in and zooming out, and they're just zoomed in all the time.
Exactly.
Is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're hyper-focused, and with good reason. They're hyper-focused on what they do. They don't do what we do, which goes back to the conversation we always have about the value that architects bring to the table. It's like when owners are communicating with users and the users are saying, I have all of this wish list. And then the owner comes back to the architect said, okay, this is what we can and can't accommodate. And then, it's this back and forth of like trying to hone in on what they can use. Yeah. That's the thing that people, constantly need to see as the value of an architect.
Yeah. Well, and the architect also needs to be able to communicate that story to them effectively.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't, not all architects can do that.
Well,
to be honest, right?
Sometimes, like, a lot of the times, like, the user groups can't really be troubled with, like, I can't have all of these meetings. I've got classes, I've got research, I've got this, I've got that to do. And I get it. I get that, their time is limited, but it goes to a sort of like devaluation of our time. Cause it's just like, I just told you what I want. Just give it to me. And they don't understand the transaction has got to be back and forth. We would like to explain to you why you can't do this, because we would like to understand what you do and don't need so that we can make sure that we can give you what you want. And if we don't really truly understand, or you don't truly understand the limitations of what we're facing, neither one of us will ever come to a consensus. That's
where that communication comes in, right? And
exactly.
And it is a negotiation, right? There is a negotiation phase here.
Yes.
It's not just, here's my laundry list of wants, make it happen. It's like, okay, now let's talk about all of the constraints that are affecting this space, the project, the site, there's so many different things pulling on different ropes in different directions in this tug of war. Exactly. It's not just this way or that way. It's radial. This is a radial plan.
It is. And
radial tug of war. Yeah.
And so that's when you have got to make sure that you have full buy-in from, like, say, the owner. In this particular case, there are so many different facets of people involved.
The multi-headed client.
The multi-headed
group.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
And it's just like the people who actually need to be at the table are the user groups, because they're the ones who are going to be day by day there. But, there's nuances of things. And it's just,
and there's that administration layer that adds the extra complexity, but also the guardrails for the user group, right? Because somebody has to be the decider, right? And typically that's going to be that administration layer who probably won't be there when the building actually opens anyway, to add another layer of complexity.
And so, And then, not to get too deep into this, but it's just like, making sure that we don't start working on something that doesn't have full user buy-in because a lot of times people don't understand. It's like, well, okay, yeah, I did change my mind, but what matter does that make? It's just changing a little bit of stuff on that piece of paper, right? Mm-hmm. Not understanding that there's recalculations, reassessments, all of these other things. Does the equipment that you now want to move in there add a greater load, heat load for mechanical, a demand load for electrical, and all of these other things? Oh, by the way, that needs a drain. Well, guess what? You can't put in a drain in here because, it's just like
down.
All of these little things that people think are just that little, it's just a little symbol on the piece of paper. How hard is that?
Mm-hmm.
And then wonder why it takes us, why can't you just turn this around tomorrow? Why can't you, we asked for this, why does it take you so long to do what it is that we're asking you to do? And they don't see the nuances of fully vetting, fully assessing things to make sure, again, that it works. Because then at the end of the day, if say they, want to move in a minus 80 freezer, but we can't accommodate it, then we have to go back and tell them, by the way, you can't move in this, minus 80 freezer. And then they're like, okay, well then if I can't have that freezer, I can't really work here. Again, it's those little simple things.
Balancing all of that, being the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
The coordination, the complexity behind the scenes. I think all this leads to what we were really going to talk about here.
Exactly. I was definitely going to say that. So because people ask us for things, they ask us for quick turnarounds, essentially expect us, somewhat demand us to give them an expedient answer. It causes us to, and I'm going to give you an example of something that I heard in a meeting that we had with, a client that I'm not going to talk about, but still just hint, this is where we're leading into this conversation. It's like, we have all of these demands of all of this stuff that we need. We need the schedule. We need a work plan. We need all of this stuff. And by the way, we expect that it'll be in our inbox by Sunday morning when we come to work.
Sounds reasonable.
Morning when they come to work.
Sunday morning.
So, here we are getting this request, and now this request is forcing us to overwork. And
there's the word.
And there's the word, because you had sent me, I think actually even on the day that I was having this conversation, or we were having this conversation about these demands about getting stuff, you had sent me an article.
Serendipity. Yeah,
and
serendipity.
You must have felt or heard that little cosmic
the universe is conspiring.
Just like, did somebody just ask Cormac to overwork? Let me send this.
Exactly. So what is the title of the article that we're going to talk about?
So what you had sent me was from the Harvard Business Review, and it was Why We Glorify Overwork and Refuse to Rest. And
let's just hang on that pregnant pause right there. Just soak it in. Yeah, just let that marinate for a moment.
Why we glorify overwork and refuse to rest.
There you go. Meditate on that.
Exactly.
I'm letting out a heavy sigh here too, because and I think you said that this is probably more of an American thing than, it's definitely all over, but it's also, it is kind of an American thing, right? Because we get 2 weeks of vacation every year, right? We get 2 whole weeks. Compare that to other nations out there who take sabbaticals. They take 6 weeks off in the summertime. The office closed down every Friday in the summer. There's lots of different examples.
Yeah, paid sick leave that does. Well, I was going to say paid sick leave that doesn't affect their actual vacation time, because that's not one and the same. Whereas what we're doing is we've got paid time off, which is either you can get sick for those 2 weeks, or you can go and rest and relax for those 2 weeks. And it's you choose however you want to not be here at work here's what we're allowing you to, we allow you to be sick this much, or take off this much, or whatever this much. And you say, oh, you have to leave for a couple of hours to spend time with your family or whatever. Okay, well, those 2 hours, don't charge them to a project. Don't charge them to a client. You charge that to your time off, because that is you choosing to not be here. And
okay, but at the same time, Cormac. Okay, PTO actually stands for personal time off, right? Or private time off. I've even heard people say it's like, you don't need to know what I'm doing when I put those hours down. None of your business. It could be, like you just said, it could be sick time. It could be a doctor's visit. It could be, you could be visiting the office of the principal because your kid got in trouble. You could be going on vacation. It doesn't matter. It's personal time off. But at the same time, I just want to put you on the spot. How much PTO do you have in the bank?
How much do I have right now? Like currently?
Yeah.
As of today, because I checked. Because as part of this whole thing, I needed to have this conversation because I knew you were going to grill me. I have 5 weeks.
5 weeks. So like, even though you've got to write it down and do the PTO thing, and you're not allowed to, you can't bill that to a client, you still have 5 weeks because architects don't take time off. Like what, this is where we're going to have a reckoning right now.
Well, what's interesting about it is, so like, the article, and we'll definitely put a link in the show notes, but the article was really talking about corporate America. And there are absolutely tons of parallels between corporate capitalist America and architecture America. We could call,
what are we going to call it?
What are we going to call it? But I think it's somewhat systemic through architecture, period. Like global architecture has this almost demand that if I ask you something, I'm going to go on vacation for a week, but when I come back, I want you to have it. Make sure. Or it's just like, oh, by the way, I'm taking, a week off while you're taking a week off. Yeah, but when I come back, it'll be there, right? It'll, what I'm asking you to do, that'll probably take about a week's worth of time. It's going to be there, right? And you're just like, wait, how does that work?
How does that work?
And there's just this expectation. So you and I have talked so many times about boundaries and our lack of being able to set them, which as we go through this article and we talk about...
This is the royal us, right? This is the royal we.
This is definitely the royal us. So there was a, let's see, there was one, and I do have the article up basically right next to the screen here. It was basically talking about...
So you're not reading email right now?
You're not, no.
You're not responding to a Zoom chat. You're okay. I just want to make sure you're focused.
Yeah.
That's on the other screen. That's on one of the other three screens.
Or that screen, but not this screen. This screen is dedicated to you. So if I ever glance over at those two, I'm not paying attention to you.
Yeah.
Because
okay, so I just want to make sure that you're not multitasking right now and overworking when you're supposed to be doing this. We're ARCA speaking.
Yes. Well, so they were talking about most of us prefer to be too busy or to not be busy enough. We get a greater sense of our own value when we are working than when we're not. And, I think about it. I think we as architects in interest because that first line started to stand out. It's like, we have this vision of an architect who wants to spend time on vacation, to get out and experience, like we've been talking about the past few, get out and experience architecture because it kind of enriches our understanding of the built environment and how we go about doing it. But, you and I were talking, we've talked about in the past and stuff that we are so beholden to this kind of like nonstop work that the deadline that we never really get to that point of basically being able to kind of like make ourselves better architects, understanding the built environment better, seeing what else, seeing what other people are doing out there, experiencing the trends of just like daily life because we're too busy trying to hash out an ASI, or something like that,
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny that this came also or at the same time as I just finished watching a series on the Disney Plus streaming service called Light and Magic, and it's the story of Industrial Light and Magic, which is probably the most famous visual effects house of the entire movie industry. And it's basically the story of how that got started, the transition from analog to digital. And there's a lot of parallels in there to architecture as well. So everything that we look through or we look at, we're looking through the lens of architecture, right? So we're looking at this article through the lens of architecture. This article was not written about architecture. It wasn't written for architects, but it definitely has application. I'm looking at this 6-part series on Disney Plus about ILM also through the lens of architecture and how closely it mirrors working in, even in school, in studio, the very analog, hands-on nature of creating, solving problems, creativity, the all-nighter aspect of it, the long hours aspect of it. Like that was our training grounds as architects, right? For what we see happening in the industry as well. And so what you're talking about right now, there's just like there was a quote in this article: immersion in work helps hold off feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, loneliness, sadness, and emptiness that can arise when we have time off. And it's funny because as you were kind of talking about the things that you're doing on this project, and you, at the end of the day, you feel like there's an accomplishment there. It's kind of like when I go out and I move a load of firewood because I just had to cut down some dead trees it's like, oh man, I feel accomplished. Do you ever feel accomplished after, sitting in a Shea lounge on a beach? Do you feel a sense of accomplishment? And I don't think we do, but I also think that's a problem, right? So it's like, because it's hard to, I think the feeling of accomplishment is what leads us to workaholism. Yeah. And we like to feel like we accomplished something, and we don't feel that in the balanced part of our life so much, or at least we don't equate it the same way.
So, and this was the conversation kind of like off camera that you and I were having a little while ago about me feeling like this is an epidemic that is mostly American, because you talk about, so like in the American culture, and I know, from your and I's like very similar backgrounds and just some of the experiences that we've had, and just for the fact that we're kind of Gen Xers, that, we are raised.
Yeah. We're not kind of Gen Xers.
Yeah, we are Gen Xers.
Just date us right there.
We were raised that, in a way that to believe that work defines us, that our work ethic defines us, that we were almost expected to outwork everybody else. And so we always kept working towards defining ourselves by the product of work that we did, whether good work, bad work, whatever. It's just, work. We're going to
the benefit of others, though. I mean, what's interesting to me as you say that, because I totally believe that as well. Like the expectation was set and we lived up to it, right? And that was set by our parents. It was set by our teachers. It was set by the people that we worked for, and then exploited by the people that we worked for. Right. And it created a culture of, because when you're so focused on this thing, you're also working with other people who are very focused on this thing. Those people tended to marry each other, like create families together, instill those same work ethics and other ethics and morals into their offspring, who then repeated that process as well, right? And so you can see how we got here, right? Like it is programming, like the genes of the individuals as they go through these experiences to be that, to fully embody that.
And so I remember having the questions asked. It's just like, oh, do you have it's like, I'm, such and such son. And, they're like, oh, how are you spending your summer? Do you have a job? It's just like, we're expected to be working. Right. Or do you have a job after work
Summer
or
job,
after school?
Internships,
all of these things. And yes was typically the answer is like, yeah, I have a summer job. Yeah, I have a job after work and all after school and all of these things. And it was just always
keeping busy.
Exactly. Are you keeping busy? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And you compare that. And this is why I say that this feels like it's a very systemic American problem, because we were raised to keep busy, keep working, keep
idle hands. What's the saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Idle hands are the devil's workshop. And
yes.
Like
that's a good name for a studio right there.
Exactly.
Devil's workshop. Yeah. I like it.
But so then here I am as an 18-year-old. I'm in the Army. I'm stationed overseas in Europe, and I see a completely different aspect to the way people live. There are people who they work hard, but they also enjoy hard. They have time. They have time off. They close during lunchtime. They really, they force themselves to not always be working. I was on a phone call with one of our consultant engineers who happened to be remote working in, I believe it was Denmark, and it was 5:00 their time. And so we were sitting here talking, and he's just like, guys, sorry, I got to interrupt. I've got, and he was like really the only engineer on the call, and it was, our team and him. And so essentially it like shut this meeting down pretty quickly, because he was just like, they're, telling us to get out of the building because they're about to close it down.
And this is closes down. Yeah.
They're basically saying it's 5:00, work is over, get lost.
Yeah. Right.
And
yeah, totally.
But there is a, and we talked about, kind of like these cultural aspects. The culture in America is to continue to work and to show your worthiness through work, right? And then that leaches into our head, and it's just like, I feel like such a slug. I really didn't get anything done today, or this, that, or the other. And so you're just like, we've been programmed to want to work and keep working. And it's like, okay, I've left work. I just commuted an hour home. I'm going to, plug my laptop in. I'm going to get a little bit of food. Then I'm going to come back to my laptop, check in, make sure that there's no emails that came in, or if somebody needs something or things like that. And
it's so easy. It's so easy.
We've made it so easy because it's a part of our culture. It's our, again, even to this article, it's almost an expectation that you should be working hard. That why can't I reach you in the middle of the night? Like, it's the middle of the night. If, the only thing you're going to reach is a backhand, Yeah,
going back to those boundaries. And the thing that came up in the article was guardrails and what you're talking about, even with the building closing, like that's a cultural guardrail that's been put in place to protect the people, right? And we don't have that. We actually have the opposite of that. We have the notifications, the always on, dog leash that you have attached to your neck. It sits in your pocket. It's called a phone. And you talk about, if you don't have the right guardrails in place, if you don't have the ability yourself to set the boundaries, then what they talk about in the article is that you silently collude with employers who encourage us to overwork.
Right.
It's not like they're saying you must overwork, but you have all of these things that make it easier for you to do that. And they are not going to complain about that, right? Because it's benefiting them.
Something that just kind of occurred to me about not having those guardrails is it has instilled in us a way, this kind of sense of like, okay, it's okay if I'm not, 100% productive in the 8 hours that I'm within the office, because I'll go and I'll finish up some of that, exactly. I can do it anytime. I'll go finish that up a little bit later or something like that. But if you almost had the guardrail that limited you from, it's like you only really have this 8 hours to do your work throughout the day. And when you're done. You can't do it. But then it gives you this almost sense of like drive to be productive within the 8 hours, to then be able to have yourself detach from the day, to live the life that you are working for, but never experiencing, never being able to have the life that you want. It's just like, well, I work to be able to do this, or I work to be able to do that, except for you don't get a chance to do this or that because you're working.
Yeah. No, you're encouraged to do that when you retire. Like save all the good stuff for after 65 or after 72, whatever the new number is.
When you physically can't go and enjoy some of those things. Exactly. And
yeah, because your back is out because you've sat at the desk for 50 plus years, right?
One of the things that they pointed out in this article was the almost expectation of like a 12-hour day, and how that has an impact on your physical well-being, your emotional and mental well-being. And, these are the things that we sacrifice during the work time of our life and then we don't realize that all of that has had such this adverse impact on our lives that when we actually get to retirement, we can't fully enjoy retirement because we're so physically wrecked. We're so mentally wrecked. Yeah.
You can't enjoy it until it's too late, and it's too late because you can't do it anymore.
Exactly.
You, sir, there you are. You have the double whammy. You're trained as a soldier as well. Yeah. And so I think like somebody in your situation who has been in combat situations, who's been deployed, who's been trained to follow orders, who's trained to be, and I think you've said this yourself, which is that you are the guy who runs out on the battlefield to save people. You put yourself at risk to save everybody else, whether it's the company, the team, the project, whatever it is, because it's in your DNA. That's how you're wired. So not only did you do that in architecture school, right, to put the project, put all of this above yourself, but you also were trained that way as a soldier. And so like we just talked about guardrails. We could maybe talk about personal guardrails. Have you done anything to put boundaries in place to help you? Because the inability to regulate work habits, that's a phrase that they actually talk about in this article. It's not like that's what it is. You have a disability to regulate your work habits, right? It's an inability, disability, but it's like it's so wired in you. Is there anything that you can speak to that you put in place to kind of help yourself as a tool?
So we've been doing this for 12 years. We've been, kind of like somewhat bearing our architectural personal soul for 12 years for everybody to hear. I could lie to you and say, oh yeah, sure.
Oh, let's just go back. Let's just rewind the tape. I was going to say, go find it.
But for an absolute fact that is not the case. That, there's been times where I would work 85 hours a week. There's times where I would be working because I had reception at a campsite where everybody else is out canoeing. And here I am back at the campfire with the attached to, my computer attached to my phone.
Hotspotting.
Exactly. Hotspotting it. Yep. And clicking away, doing stuff and answering things, and people.
Yay, technology.
And me not allowing myself, because it's like, oh, this is so important.
Right.
One of the interesting things about the article is it talks about how we've come to terms with the excuses that we make in our life to basically not take the PTO, not enjoy our time off, detach from work. And I've lived practically every single excuse and probably have a boat ton more of other excuses that I've made with my life.
Right. A metric ton.
Leaving all of the colorful metaphors off of that. But yes.
Yes. Right.
And the interesting thing about that is we're seeing, and we've had this conversation about the new generation, and the new generation who's coming in, and they see the way that we were working. They see the way that we're working now, the way that profession has worked in the past and stuff like that. And they look at it and they say, yeah, I don't want that. I don't want this.
It's not a badge of honor in any form.
Right? We used to be proud of the fact, sickly enough, I used to be proud that I had all of this PTO saved up. Where is that badge of honor?
Right.
I'm not spending the time with my family. I'm not spending time off. I'm not doing what I've said, like enriching my career by going out and experiencing other things. And so there, has been times where I just haven't done what I should be doing. And as I start to see the new generation come in, and we've heard and we've talked about so many different times where, we'll have project managers or something that's like, I just can't get, work like I worked. They don't come in early. They don't stay late. They just, they come in and they do their 8 hours and they leave. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's all we're expecting them to do. That's what their contracts, that's what the contract they sign with. The contract is 40 hours a week, and however they, those 40 hours a week are, if it's come in at 9, they leave at 5, they've been efficient enough, boom, they're done. Why should we be expecting them? We have spent so much time instilling this weird work ethic in our life, in our profession, that makes it feel like an expectation to overwork yourself. And we've carried it as a badge of honor. It's like, look at me, how do you expect to get promoted if you're not going to work, 60, 70, 80 hours a week?
Do what I did. Yeah. Do what I did. Right.
It's just like the way for you to, ahead in this company is to outwork everybody. Really? Like, why is that? And so you see the new generation basically not demanding to live our bad habits. And we want to criticize them instead of analyzing ourselves and saying, why aren't we more wanting to do what they want to do?
Yeah, I think part of it is like when you were talking about that story about why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? And you hear those complaints. It's like, well, let's just step back and say, are we doing it right? I mean, exactly. That self-analysis isn't really happening.
No.
Right.
No.
And so how do you broach that subject and say, well, have you ever thought about, because you don't want to, I shouldn't actually say that. I'm just wondering how often that comes up. How often do we actually push back and say, have you thought if this is like still appropriate? Because just because it's the way we've always done it doesn't mean it's the way we should continue to do it. And it's interesting, right? Because we're starting to see unionization as an example, where it's basically coming out of New York City, right? Where there's a lot of unionization in adjacent industries to architecture. Right. Now we're starting to see it in architecture. It's basically saying like we need boundaries. We need to come together to be stronger together to enforce these boundaries and basically say, we're not going to do the one-off. If this person's okay with working 80 hours a week, but this person isn't, who's the bad guy there? Right. It's like, it's interesting to me to see that happen because there are so many long hours for such little pay, especially for people just getting out of school who want to go work at a firm that has notoriety or interesting projects or whatever. And they're being basically preyed upon by the quote unquote leadership of these companies to benefit the most from those long hours and little pay.
I sent this article to a friend of mine who then sent me a link to an article that was written by psychologists about this, this kind of like attachment syndrome and how, we're defined like this proving your worthiness, proving your worth through your work and all of this other stuff. And she had kind of commented back about, she's like, all of this sounds like you. And she's like, she's like, to me, this is your identity. This, like your passion is your identity, but your identity is your work and all of these things. And, I started to look at it and it was just like this, I've felt like I've done myself such a disservice by, it goes back to, let me just, it goes back to this conversation about boundaries. It goes back to this conversation about the reality of the way that we approach our clients, the way that we set up projects, the way that we staff projects and things like that. I mean, we don't exactly get highest fees. We don't get a lot. We do, but, like we do, and you just said this, architecture is hard. It's like we manage the projects, we manage the clients, we manage the engineers, we manage all of these different things. We do all of the design work. We do all of this coordination. We do all of this stuff. And if you look at our fee per the level of responsibility to everybody else, ours is usually like, at the bottom.
It's paltry. Yeah.
And so, when we set it up like that, and then we say, okay, well, the only way that we're going to be able to really be profitable on this project is that we need to limit the either amount of billable hours on this project. We need to amount billable staff on this project. However it is that the makeup is that makes us rationalize being profitable on this project is basically reducing the amount of time that we spend on it. And we ultimately do the project a disservice by trying to limit the amount of time we spend on a project rather than saying, hey, we know that this project is actually going to demand X amount of time and all of this other stuff. Then we're in this catch-22. It's just like, okay, yeah, we know the reality of how long it's going to take to do the project. But, Cormac's competing for this project. And now Evan comes in and he's competing for this project too. And he says, I can do it for the same amount of money, but I can do it for less time. And you're just like, and then that no, you really can't. But you're going to figure out a way to either
sweep those hours under the rug.
You're going to sweep those hours under the rug. You're going to push your people to work harder. You're going to overwork them. You're going to demand things from them. And then you get to the point where it's just like, okay, the right thing to do would be is to, maybe compensate them for their overworking and stuff. It's just like, but we just
Here's a pizza.
Exactly. Damn it, you beat me to it. I was just like, hey, we're going to have a pizza party. You're like,
pizzas are not a bonus. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, we have set up, and we've talked about this in the past about how bad architects are at the business side of things because we never are truthful with ourselves on how long it takes. And if we're not truthful with ourselves, we can't be truthful with our clients. And if we can't convince our clients of the truth of how long it takes us to do these projects, we're always going to be working in a deficit.
Yes.
Yet we still keep doing it to ourselves.
Okay, so the interesting thing about that to me is something that they also stated in this article, and let's see it. Oh, here it is. It's workaholism is a form of self-anesthetizing.
Yeah.
And so basically it's like we're doing this so that we don't have to focus on change. We don't have to focus on actually stepping back and looking at the big picture of the pros and cons and the detrimental effects of the things that we are doing, because we're just so busy, in quotes, doing these things, right? It's like, well, look at this checklist. Look at all this stuff I've got to do. I've got to do all this. I've got to do it. I've got to do all these things on my checklist.
Yep.
What we're really saying is, like, don't look right over there at the elephant in the room, right? Don't look at it, because if you just keep busy on this checklist right here, you don't have to look at yourself. You don't have to look at your business. You don't have to look at your fees. You don't have to look at your processes. You don't have to look at your technology. You don't have to look at any of that stuff, because you're just so busy working hard over here, right?
Exactly.
And it really is like it's a lack of reflection on all of those other things, because that's scary stuff. And so really it's fear. Like, this workaholism is based on fear of looking over there at the elephant in the room, because change is hard, right? And I might actually figure out that I've been super ineffective. I might actually validate my deepest fears that I am completely ineffectual in these 5 areas, when the perception that I want people to have of me is that I'm a really hard worker, and look at all these things that I've accomplished.
Yeah. And while you're working and you've got your head down and your blinders on, you see the perception of that elephant. It's right there off
it's
in the
right
distance.
There, just right
and you
there.
You know that the answer to a lot of the problems, self-induced problems, is to face that, but you never do, because you feel so, it's like, we have these conversations about, because you just kind of like gave a list of, so it's like, oh, you know, we'd be more efficient if we had, you know, the right experience on a job, or, you know, if we had, you know, better equipment to be, you know, run more efficiently, so we're not like slowed down by, you know, Revit taking, you know, 2 hours to open or an hour to synchronize, or all of these other things. If we were just faster at being able to do all these things, we could, you know, work more efficiently. You know, we never say, okay, we can work more efficiently, but then does that efficiency reduce the amount of time that we should actually be working?
It just gives you more time to put more shit in the project.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that's been the case forever. I mean, the whole idea of building information modeling was like, the drawings get produced for you. You build the model. Look at the drawings. They magically appear. And what do? We just put more shit in those drawings. Like,
yeah.
We keep talking about the size of the set of drawings, and it's like, you 2,000 sheets in, right, to this thing. And it's like, do you really need all that? I mean, is this
right?
There are no guardrails for any of this stuff. And so I come back to the question, like, have you put any guardrails in place? Like, one of the simple ones, and we talked about this on an episode, we talked about focus modes on the iPhone. Mm-hmm. I have a focus mode at night called sleep. Guess what sleep does? It basically puts my phone into do not disturb, so that nothing can come through until 7 a.m. the next day, right? From 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. My Wi-Fi at night shuts off in my house. I have it on a timer. The Wi-Fi is gone, right? So will the cell signal still work? Yes, it'll still work, but the Wi-Fi shuts off. And it's like little things like that. Like, no one's going to do that for you. You have to do it. You have to create those boundaries, and then you have to live by them. If you don't do it, no one else will do it for you, and they will take advantage of you by not having those things in place, in fact, right? So it's like, I don't know, I think there is hope, and there's ways you can accomplish some of this even with Technology. There's some of it you can accomplish with your words by saying no to people. Right. Exactly. But there are things that can be done. I would be interested to hear what people have done to put boundaries in place, whether it's technology. I don't know what those things could be. I expect people could blow my mind with really simple techniques, but I'd be interested to hear what those are.
I had a friend who, and you say that, and that's interesting because, so there's the personal boundaries that we can set, right? But then what about the corporate boundaries? What about... Yeah,
there's cultural. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because, I have a friend who recently took a job at a firm, and he was telling me that they actually have means to track the efficiency of a project that actually has automated indicators of, kind of like this, either like increase in like work demand load. I'm not quite clear on exactly what it is, but basically it's saying it's like, okay, Evan, if you're working so much and you're billing all of these hours and stuff, it's an indicator to me that we need to get you help. We need to get you support. And it's not something that is just like, Evan, you never told us, you never raised the red flag because you're so hyper focused on getting it done that there isn't a time for you to stop and take a breath and like raise your hand and say, please help me.
There's a technology called BIM Beats, and I've had these guys on my other podcast talking about it, and it's like they put metrics to everything. So basically they can track, and this sounds creepy, corporate creepy, they can track how long you're working in Revit, how long you're working in Rhino, how much time you're putting in on these different applications, how much Outlook is open, whatever those things are. There's a lot of different metrics that could be applied. And employees are thinking like, oh my God, they're going to see like how ineffective I am. And actually the story is, no, you're working too much. I can see it right here. I can actually see that you're putting 8 hours on your time card, but you're spending 12 hours a day syncing to Central and doing all these things. Is it a technology issue? Do you need more training? Do you need boundaries? Do we need to help you in some way? Right. Those are ways that the company could actually help by knowing a little bit more about the work habits of people. And at the same time, there is kind of a privacy issue there, or, a perceived privacy issue there. So I'm not saying one way or the other, because it is nuanced. You got to have the right intentions. Yeah,
because I will probably say that it'll be perceived. It's just like, oh, well, they don't trust me to do my work. And so this is a way for them to track, whether or not I'm efficient, inefficient, whatever it is that. And so, I do definitely see like the catch-22 of all of this. But, there are, it's just like, if the culture doesn't exist for you to throw up that red flag and say, holy crap, I'm drowning. Can you please, I need help. Then, where does the responsibility lie in being able to have kind of like this joint flag throwing, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Right. Yeah. If you can't raise the flag, will someone raise it for you, kind of a thing, right?
Exactly. Because, I'll say that, when I was doing those ungodly hours, it was just, okay. The joke was, Cormac, you put, in fact, this was almost an exact quote. Cormac, you only put 60 hours on your timesheet. Did you, were you on vacation? And you're just like,
that hurts.
It does hurt. And it points out, it's just like, okay, nobody, like, the only way, like, nobody's like saying, holy shit, you're working 85 hours. They're saying, oh, you're not working as hard as you normally are. What's wrong with you?
Well, and you set that expectation,
exactly.
Inadvertently. You didn't realize that it was going to hurt you later, but it kind of did, right?
Right.
And so like this idea of finding your value in work, how do you start to reassess your values? To me, that's the bigger question, right? How do we reflect on our behavior, our output, where our values are, what those list of values are? It's like at some point you actually have to go sit in a silent room with no devices and think about it. And I think that's part of that fear that I was talking about earlier. It's like the elephant's in the room, man. Yeah. You actually have to look at it at some point. The industry, the profession has to look at itself. We've had so many of these conversations. Like I'm even thinking of the one we had with Evelyn Lee on this podcast about redesigning our business models, redesigning our practices, because the current model doesn't work. How long is it going to be until we do that, even on a personal level? Do we have to step back and reflect and say, is this where I want to be? Is this where I thought I would be? Is this what I want to be known for? Is this where I actually find my value? How can you start to build a new framework to evolve, right? Like, because things are always changing. If you're resistant to that, you're going to die, right? At some point, right? And you're going to be obsolete if you're not going to die. But it's like those kinds of things, I think, are the things we really have to think about. And I hope that this conversation kind of sparks that in people to say, okay, we took a real deep breath at the beginning of this podcast, right? How can we actually do that personally and say, oh, I need to reevaluate. I really need to reevaluate, because you are the one who has to do that. Again, no one is going to do that for you. They're interested in themselves, or they're interested in some other motivator, right? That they have. And so that's not you, right? They're not going to come in and save the day for you. There's no Prince Charming that's going to come in and wake you up, right? With a kiss. You've got to wake yourself up. Maybe this episode will do that. Maybe this episode's the Prince Charming. I don't know. But it's like that's what we have to do. And I hear these stories. We had Jake Rudin out of architecture on the podcast, right? We put a link to that episode in the show notes. They have a whole business, a consulting business called Out of Architecture, for this very reason, because we have the blinders on so tight. Like it's just such a narrow field of view that we have to look outside of that and say, I mean, he's actually helping people get out.
He's like, people are asking themselves, how can I regain myself?
Yes.
And he's like, because my profession is not, my profession is not set up to do it. My corporate culture is not set up to do that for me. I am kind of stuck in this whirlwind where I have to, do I want to keep my job? So I'll just keep like feeding the machine. And then, you get to this point where it's just like burnout to a point of almost, your own personal self non-existence, that then you have to like go and knock on like Jake's door and say, it's like, I need help. Like
therapy.
You need therapy. I'm in an abusive relationship. Help me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and we even said it with, when we were talking to Jake, it's just like like the profession needs to look at the existence of companies like this, companies like Out of Architecture, to say, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to do?
Why does that need to exist?
Exactly. It's just like, why
is that even a thing?
Exactly.
Why is Out of Architecture a thing?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
And so, but it's a thing. And if you go through and you look at the testimonials of all of the people and the complaints, you read the book, because we had, kind of started the whole conversation with him about the book itself and read the book and read all of these different testimonies about the way that the culture basically chews you up and spits you out and doesn't care. That's when you have to, does it start at, in a way I was thinking as you were talking, it was like, in a way it does start at the personal level. It's like, go into that dark room, take those deep breaths, listen to the silence, start thinking to yourself, what is important to you? And if you're passionate enough about it, go to, start taking the next steps of like how to figure out how to change the baby steps of like, maybe the company and then maybe, the profession and stuff like that. Or knock on the old Jake's door and say this, it's just not. But I mean, I think we can only get change if we demand change. And
if the change.
Exactly. Damn it, you beat me to it again. I was just like, and the only way we could do that is to be the change. There. That's what I was saying.
You can cut my part out. You can take that one.
No. I like it. Because, yeah. So let's all go into a dark room.
Mm-hmm.
Totally quiet. Take deep cleansing breaths. And just
Cormac will now lead us in this meditation. Yeah. Om. Do your ohms. I'll be meditating until the next time we talk.
Exactly.
With a new epiphany right around the corner. I know it's coming because I'm going to ask the universe for that new epiphany. It will deliver. You may not like what it has to say, but
be that cosmic dope slap to the head.
Yes, indeed. All right.